Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are taking a historical shortcut straight into 1926.
A fascinating year.
It really is. I mean, this is a year where you could be listening to the brand new national radio network while driving on the new Route 66. But that dizzying speed of life, it created just as much anxiety as it did opportunity. We've got a really dense stack of sources focused on this one pivotal year, and they show both this, immense optimism and a really profound underlying instability.
It's the perfect historical moment to analyze. Our sources describe it beautifully. The feeling was like boarding a jazz-filled ocean liner, just steaming full speed ahead.
Some of that analogy.
It's perfect, right? You have this unprecedented prosperity, a sense of absolute freedom, but that speed is masking these deep social tensions and, frankly, massive financial risk. For you, the listener, 1926 offers a perfect case study in how technological revolutions almost always create a corresponding cultural crisis.
Okay, let's unpack that collision. Maybe starting with the technological breakthroughs that were, literally shrinking the nation and pointing to the stars.
Absolutely.
So March 1926, we see the birth of the space age. Robert Goddard, working pretty much in isolation in a field in Massachusetts,
Right.
launches the world's first liquid-fueled rocket.
And what's so fascinating is how the world reacted, or didn't react. This tiny flight, 10 feet, reached maybe 41 feet in the air. It was an engineering miracle, but the press reaction was ridicule. One Boston newspaper called it an adventure into the absurd. The public just saw it as, pure abstract science. They were completely missing the forest for the trees.
So they're focused on the absurdity of the future, while the present was already being completely transformed by a more immediate use of flight.
Exactly. We moved from dreaming about rockets to regulating airplanes.
Right.
Just 2 months later, May 1926, the Air Commerce Act gets passed. And this is a critical piece of legislation. It set up federal safety standards for civil aviation for the first time.
So it's about licensing pilots inspecting the planes.
Yes. The government recognized that the airplane wasn't just a stunt machine for barnstormers anymore. It was the future of commerce and travel, and it needed official infrastructure to be safe and reliable.
So that act basically legitimized commercial flight.
Absolutely. It laid the groundwork for the airlines we know today. Without that legal and safety structure, the public never would have accepted air travel en masse.
And while flight was conquering the vertical space, media and physical infrastructure were shrinking the horizontal distance.
Okay, let's talk about connectivity.
Sure.
1926 is the year the NBC radio network was established.
That is massive. Just massive. Before NBC, broadcasts were regional, local. Now, instantly, you have a truly national popular culture.
Millions of homes linked together.
Sharing the same news, the same music, the same advertising, it created this shared national consciousness almost overnight. And that shared experience was then cemented by new physical infrastructure. 1926 is also the year U.S. Route 66 was officially designated. Chicago, all the way to Santa Monica.
And it wasn't just a line on a map. It was immediately envisioned and promoted as a vital artery of commerce.
Wow.
That's transformation. You can now listen to the same Babe Ruth World Series broadcast in New York or Los Angeles, and you could physically drive the newly designated route between those two places. The country was starting to feel smaller.
And that new mobility, well, it required people to have the time and the money to actually move.
Which brings us to arguably the most revolutionary labor change of the decade.
We're talking about Henry Ford.
We are. In September 1926, the Ford Motor Company implements the 5-day, 40-hour work week. This was just a seismic shift.
And what's fascinating here is the philosophy behind it, right?
Yeah.
This wasn't just a concession to labor unions.
No, not at all. It was a calculated, absolutely brilliant business strategy. Ford wasn't just optimizing production, he was creating demand.
How did they frame that?
Well, his son Edsel Ford articulated it really clearly. He argued that workers needed more than just one day for rest. They needed time for, and I'm quoting here, self-improvement and for building up the place called home.
It's a fundamental rewrite of the capitalist contract. You need leisure time to go out and buy a Ford car or buy a radio or take that trip down Route 66.
That is the key insight. They were moving from seeing labor purely as a unit of production to recognizing the value of the worker as a consumer.
And the sources say contemporaries compared it to what?
Only to Ford's earlier announcement of the $5 a day minimum wage. It established leisure as an essential economic input, not just, a luxury.
So the 5-day week was the strategic, calculated side of the 1926 boom. But we have to look at the reckless, almost manic side.
Oh, yeah.
The explosion of speculative finance happening at the exact same time.
And nowhere was that mania more concentrated than the Florida land boom. Money was just pouring in from all over the country. Investors were buying everything from beachfront property to literal water lots.
Sight unseen.
Sight unseen, hoping to flip them immediately. It was pure speculation.
And this wasn't just enthusiastic investing. This was fueled by new and often incredibly risky financial structures.
That's right. Developers relied heavily on something called the Flagler system, a model of aggressive expansion often fueled by insider lending from local banks.
So the whole region's financial health was tied to land values just continuing to inflate.
Indefinitely. Carl Fisher, the developer of Miami Beach, he famously said he made the dredge the national emblem of Florida. He was literally creating land out of swamps and selling it for a fortune.
And everyone just assumed the good times were permanent. But the market got a devastating and very literal natural correction.
That is the critical warning of 1926. In September, the Great Miami Hurricane hit. The storm was cataclysmic, winds over 150 miles per hour. The devastation was just staggering.
How bad was it?
4,700 homes destroyed, 25,000 people left homeless. It shocked the entire nation.
And that kind of destruction, it immediately punctured the delusion of endless growth.
It shattered investor confidence overnight. The real estate market collapsed. The speculation just dried up. And the most telling detail from our sources is this. Florida plunged into an economic depression 3 years before the rest of the nation.
3 years.
3 years. It was the canary in the coal mine, exposing the dangers of that unregulated speculative finance that really defined the whole era.
And that lesson of financial fragility, it fed directly into the social and moral anxieties of the decade. Let's pivot now to the great culture clash.
Where the new woman of 1926 was front and center.
Right. The flapper.
She was the ultimate symbol of modernity, you know?
Yeah.
The bobbed hair, short skirts, public smoking and drinking, a direct challenge to Victorian morality. But beneath the fashion, 1926 gave us this concrete proof of female power that you just couldn't ignore.
And the ultimate icon of that shift was Gertrude Itterl.
Absolutely. In August 1926, this 19-year-old was the first woman to swim the English Channel.
And she didn't just complete it. She demolished the records, beat the times of all 5 men who had done it before her.
And the reaction to her triumph is so revealing about the era's moral panic. When she came home, New York's official greeter, Grover Whalen, he specifically praised her for making people realize that after all, young womanhood today is not giving all of its time to smoking and drinking.
So her physical triumph was immediately used as a weapon against the anxieties around the flapper generation.
100%.
Yeah.
But that public praise contrasted so sharply with the invasive scrutiny women faced when they had to deal with official systems.
This is where the debate over mother's aid comes in.
Exactly. State support for women raising children alone. And this debate, it divided the feminist movement itself. You had the egalitarian feminists, like Alice Paul, fighting for the Equal Rights Amendment.
So absolute equality.
And then you had the social maternalists, like Helen Glenn Tyson, who argued for differential treatment for necessary protections for motherhood.
So what did that actually mean for a mother who was applying for aid?
It meant the state acted as a surrogate husband. And it did that through intensive moral and scientific vetting. The standards were almost deliberately impossible to meet.
Can you give us some examples of that? Because that speaks volumes about the control being exerted.
Absolutely. The most infamous was the male boarder rule. If a woman took in a lodger, to help pay the rent, her aid could be terminated.
Why?
Because caseworkers feared illicit sexual autonomy. Officials were terrified that state funds might accidentally support a woman's independence outside of marriage.
So they were trying to preserve the traditional family structure by using poverty as a lever.
Exactly. They also often denied aid to deserted wives. The fear was that providing support would encourage men to leave their families. It just completely blamed the women for the system's failures.
And then there was the scientific parenting angle.
Yes, driven by people like Helen Glenn Tyson. A mother could be deemed inefficient and denied aid if her children had unattended tonsils or adenoids or were just underweight. The policing moved from morality to this kind of pseudo-professionalism.
It's just shocking. That level of intrusion, forcing this perfect scientific parenthood, we still wrestle with that kind of crushing pressure on parents today. And all for what kind of support?
The average grant for a family of 4 was only $37.31 a month.
Wow.
The standards were punitive, impossible, And it created what Tyson herself called a new self-consciousness and crushing pressure on the new woman.
And it's no surprise that the commercial marketplace jumped in to capitalize on this exact anxiety, the woman torn between modern life and domestic duty.
Oh, advertising got very adept at softening those moral taboos. Take the Chesterfield cigarette ad.
The one with the tagline, blow some my way.
That's the one. It didn't frame female smoking as pure rebellion, but as a romantic, shared, modern activity. It made it acceptable.
And domestic appliances played the same role. Vacuums, like the Cobalt, they were marketed as scientific equipment.
Exactly, allowing the new woman to maintain this new, higher standard of cleanliness, but efficiently.
So freeing up time for her personal pursuits.
The implication being, we will sell you the tools to achieve that impossible standard so you can also be modern. The problem, as Tyson argued, was that society failed to provide the real support systems, like public nurseries, that would make that freedom real.
And as technology and commerce were shaping these personal anxieties, mass media was ensuring that everyone in America experienced the same national conversation, whether it was celebration or tragedy.
We had the highs, right? Babe Ruth leading the Yankees to a World Series victory, an event shared nationally thanks to radio. But that new mass celebrity also created a massive emotional impact when tragedy struck.
Like the sudden death of the silent film icon Rudolph Valentino. He was only 31. It caused mass hysteria.
It really demonstrated the terrifying power of celebrity in the new age of mass communication. And 1926 also marked the end of an entertainment era. The legendary escape artist Harry Houdini died on Halloween.
On Halloween.
A very public end to a very public life.
And running alongside these heroes and tragic celebrities was the constant social chaos fueled by Prohibition.
The paradox there is just inescapable, isn't it? It was meant to improve morality, but it directly led to massive black markets.
Controlled by crime syndicates like Al Capone's in Chicago. And the bribery and corruption just weakened public faith in the rule of law.
The attempt at moral reform backfired spectacularly.
And that internal chaos was compounded by this deep, ongoing national identity crisis.
We were still dealing with the fallout of the 1924 Immigration Act, which had sharply restricted arrivals from Southern and Eastern Europe. The rhetoric at the time was all about these fears of unassimilable threats, diluting American culture.
So they were actively trying to engineer who belonged in the American future by shutting the door.
Precisely. We're talking about targeting Italians, Jews, Poles, Greeks, groups perceived as unable or unwilling to integrate, and yet simultaneously you have this completely unstoppable cultural phenomenon flourishing internally. The Harlem Renaissance.
Reshaping American culture through jazz, literature, art.
Proving that American culture was far more dynamic than the restrictionists ever wanted to believe.
So what does this all mean for us today? When you look back at 1926, you see a year where every single technological and economic leap, the rocket, the radio network, the 5-day week, was accompanied by a corresponding financial or moral anxiety.
The confidence was based on machines and booming markets, but the deepest anxiety was fundamentally human. The rocket pointed to the stars, but the hurricane warned of the abyss. The greatest fear of the people in power wasn't about the economy crashing, it was about which people belonged in the American future.
That fear that led to the passage of the 1924 Immigration Act to protect the quote-unquote American identity from those deemed unassimilable.
And that's the final striking reflection for you to think about. Those groups, the Italians, the Poles, the Greeks, who were the greatest threat in 1926, are now completely interwoven into the American mainstream. Their cultures are celebrated. Time rendered that profound cultural fear entirely obsolete.
It makes you wonder.
It does. What deeply held intense anxieties are we carrying today that a century from now will look just as strange and just as unnecessary?